Hey guys, Spidey09 here. I hope you're having a marvelous day. Have I got the best, biggest treat for you? Actually, really the biggest treat for me. I have Eric and Julia Lewald. These guys were the writers on the X-Men animated series from the 90s. Really impacted my childhood in just, the most marvelous way. And it's going to be a real treat to be able to talk to them and ask some questions. And for me, maybe to help them understand the impact that they've had on the Marvel card community. So I'm going to bring them on now. Hey, Eric. Hey, Julia.
Hey
Hello.
Justin, how are you doing?
Wow, this is a real treat for me. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, it's one of those Southern California days in the middle in February, 70 degrees and sunny.
Oh,
Not like our friends up in the Northeast for
Yeah.
sure.
no, and it's been about 70 degrees here, but we're getting ready for some rain, and then the temperatures are going to drop. So we're going to go into about a week of lower temperatures. But it's so thankful. It warms my heart, regardless of what the temperature is, to have you guys here. And I have to admit, like this is the biggest interview that I've ever been able to do, and it's a real honor. And so, thank you, first of all, for saying yes to come on to the channel.
Well, thank you for inviting us. Thank you so much for inviting us. We
And
always love to celebrate the X-Men.
yeah, and as we said, people don't realize that the majority of the scripts on the show were written by people from the fairly deep South. So it's nice to be doing a show for someone in Louisiana.
Well, you got a couple of X-Men that have ties to Louisiana and Mississippi, so that's I would say some pretty big cult favorites of Gambit and Rogue.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, again, thank you. I laughed, Miss Julia, whenever I said, "Hey, look, I have a channel that's primarily focused on Marvel trading cards," and you were like, "Are you sure we're the right tool in the shed? We didn't really do anything with Marvel cards." And I laughed. I'm like, "Oh, you did, but you just don't know it."
We actually used them when this. It's so hard for people to understand that when we started working on this in February '92, 80-90% of the country did not know who the X-Men
Ooh,
were. They were a popular comic book, but that was this little small group of people that read comic books. Hadn't been on movies, hadn't really been much on television. And so when I was talking to the writers that worked on the show for me, a lot of half of them knew the X-Men, but half of them didn't. And I said, well, one of the first things you can do is go out and buy all the cards. That
yeah.
way, if you're trying to think up a story, you'll know who these people are and what the powers are and who
Mhm.
they like and who they don't like, and you'll have some basis so that you're not just writing wild, because your writers would pitch stories to us hoping to get an assignment. And one of the ways, if they knew the X-Men backwards and forwards, they were at a huge advantage. But the people that didn't, on the
They
first thing said, go buy a set of cards.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember reading where you said, "Hey, we didn't have Wikipedia in Google, so
Mm.
if you didn't already know, where would you find it?" And you guys went to the back of Marvel cards for the history and power set and descriptions of these characters to create X-Men the animated series. That is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was really helpful. There were a couple books, Marvel Universe books that were also helpful, but the cards were the best. They were the most focused and brief and to the point, and
Mhm.
exactly the kind of information you'd need if you were just wanted to have a character in one of your stories. So they were certainly a great tool.
Well, I know for me, like I would watch the X-Men on the screen, and then to be able to hold those cards in hand and learn even more about them, to me, it just brought it to life, right? Which was a real treasure for me. And I wanted to ask you about Jim Lee because Jim Lee obviously had a major impact on just the what style and aesthetics of X-Men. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. When you talk to the artists, he was very popular at the time. He was current. There must have been 30, 40 artists that had worked on the X-Men since 1963. So they all sorts of people we could pick from. And that was one of the very first questions at the big first meeting. Okay, well, what's the show going to look like? Whose art is it? Are our artists going to start with? And all of our artists agreed to the person that not only did they like Jim's work and it was currently popular, so that would
Yeah,
make Marvel happy.
just to make people aware. So
Yeah, who he is. There he is.
There you go. Oh,
See,
and
nice.
that's Jim Lee. He drew a Wolverine for me and signed it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Man.
So yeah, Jim's
But that's the art we're referring to.
right.
Mhm.
And so the artists who were all really experienced animators, been in our business 20 years, also said, well, it's not only the good look, but some people's styles just don't animate well. They're so busy,
Mm,
or there's so much detail, or there's just something about Jim's work that was really clean and
yeah.
simple. And when we simplified it further, when our
Hmm.
artists simplified it further to make it animatable, because it was so expensive back then, every moment was hand painted on
Mhm.
cells, which is nowadays
Wow.
it's easier on computers.
Right.
But we figured there might be like a couple 100,000 hand paintings per episode
Yeah.
that
Oh,
these
wow.
people just sitting there drawing these figures. And if you've got extra detail in there,
Mm.
you're doubling the amount of time that these poor artists have to
Because they had
work
to do it on every single cell over
on
and over and
every
over
Every
single
again.
single
cell. And then somebody moves a little bit, and if they've got 32 different little details in their costume, you have to redraw each one of those 32 just a little bit. I think nowadays you hit start A and finish Z and say, computer, please interpolate all that, and
Yeah.
you get it done in 5 seconds. But back then it was all painted. So
Yeah.
so a reason for choosing Jim was that it started off simple, and it lent itself to animation. And he's a wonderful guy. He's still very active out here. He's
Yes.
huge over at Warner's.
Mhm.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, he's doing DC stuff. We don't talk about
Yeah.
DC, but
Oh
you
yeah.
know, but it was nice to get him to draw. I was like, man, I got the head of DC to draw Wolverine. Like, I feel like that's a win, you know.
Yes. Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
as you were talking, it made me wonder this question, and if you thought of it, great. If not, that's okay. But do you feel like selecting Jim Lee's style for the animated was the biggest, like, most impactful decision you made, or was it something else?
It was big, but I think choosing the team might have been like a notch higher, and
Hmm.
choosing the I think the hardest thing was choosing the adult tone that we found to
Hmm.
focus it, because again, you had 30 years of comic book stories. You could have gone different directions with different people. You could have given Hollywood's history with Marvel characters. You could have got a lot younger and
Yeah.
jokier and
Mhm.
sillier.
Right.
And so I think choosing his style was high up there. But I think, just as an example, if we would have found somebody else, Stranenko style, or someone
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
would have been a reasonably good fit, and kept everything else the way we had it, I think it still could have been a successful show. I think he was important, but I think some of the other choices were more crucial to its success. Because if we gotten tone wrong, I think it just nobody would have watched. You
Yeah.
know,
I
Right. I'm going to agree with you on that. Yeah.
mean, as you say it resonates with me a lot. I mean, we watched Morph, you know,
yeah,
right, season one, right? If I remember correctly, it, he was gone as far as we knew
yeah.
for
And
some time.
he was supposed to
He
stay
was.
gone.
That
And
he,
when Eric was pitching that idea, I said, "You are crazy. This is a children's show on Saturday morning. You're
they'll never.
never going to get approval for that." But
Yeah,
your point was, you and Mark Edens, who was your head writer, that when you were pitching out because it was only supposed to be 13 episodes. That's all anyone thought it was going to go. So you were
Hmm.
given 13 episodes to do the best X-Men stories.
yeah.
And your point was
And
you
it was just
wanted
we.
heroic sacrifice. Heroic
Hmm.
sacrifice matters.
Yeah, and we wanted to make the Jeopardy real, so we didn't
Mhm.
want people to think they were just playing at it.
So that meant someone
Hmm.
sacrificing someone. And then who was that going to be?
And so we picked him. We picked that character to sacrifice in the first season on
Mhm.
purpose. He was there's a little bit of history to it. Originally, when the script was written, it was Thunderbird. It wasn't.
Oh,
It
because you
wasn't.
were going to
It wasn't
model
Jason
the
Clarke.
giant size X-Men
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because we were picking a lot of people from when the new X-Men started in
Mhm.
'75, when the Giant Size came out, and Thunderbird was one of the characters we picked. Wrote the script, and someone in his wisdom looked at it after the first draft and said, "Hold on, folks. This is the only Native American you've got on the show, and you're
No way.
shooting the first episode."
Yeah.
that could be an issue. So is there somebody else that you could use? Because in effect, we're sacrificing the characters. It's not somebody we're worrying about writing 100 episodes for. We felt fairly loose about it. And to me, it actually worked out better because Thunderbird's kind of a tough, rough character like Wolverine is. He's a real loner and real bit of a rebel. And he's a little bit duplicates Wolverine. And Morph, we just wrote Morph to be as sympathetic and lovable, likable as we could, so that when he died, the grief would be more real to the audience. And that ended up working out great for us because you just felt this pain coming from Wolverine. Like the only person that made me laugh.
I can hear him saying no, in my head.
Yeah, and so that made it really resonate. If I think if it'd been another big gruff guy, you would have felt bad for him. But Morph was this fun, loving, kind of more childlike,
Well, and in Real Economy, in those first 2 episodes, you set up an individual relationship of Morph with each character. We have one moment with everybody where we see how Morph interacts with them, and then they each feel that loss. But you did it so well that after the first 13 episodes, and we didn't know we were already working on different shows because
we thought it was over. We've been let go, and we're working on another job. And we get a call back saying, "Oh, it's great. You're going to renew. We want you to do another season. Get out of what you're doing now." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." Oh, and one other thing, we just talked. This is after about the show had showed about 5 episodes.
Getting a headache thinking about it.
Yeah, the executive Sydney from Fox called and said, "You're gonna hate me for this, but we did a focus group with a bunch of kids." I asked them who their favorite X-Men character was, and a huge landslide number said Morph. And so he just asked me, "We know why you killed him. We know how important that was to you, but is there any way you can see to bring him back?" And we just felt miserable about all that planning and all that begging and all that writing, and now we got to take it all back and make it not real death. But then we thought, okay, we're professionals. This is a wonderful job. The heck with it. We'll make it happen. And then it ended up being something where we did a lot of good stories with him coming back.
I thought so.
Damaged.
With Mr. Sinister. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So it turned out to be something that was really good for the stories. But at the time, we just felt defeated.
As I asked my focus group, my little core group, I said, "Hey, what questions do you want me to ask? I'm going to have them on the show." And Morph was the first one. And so who was the creator of Morph, or who gets that?
Well, that's I mean the name. I just came up with the name, but the history of him is there is a character. We tried every chance we could to use characters that existed in the books,
and on the art side, Will Mineo and Larry Houston had encyclopedic knowledge of X-Men comic books. I didn't. You didn't.
So I asked Larry, who in the books has maybe made a personal sacrifice for the X-Men? Maybe not died, but died would help.
No one dies in comics, right?
And he gave me a list of 4 or 5 characters from the 30 years. And one of them at the top, he said, "This is my favorite," was a character named Changeling.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Changeling.
And so he sacrificed himself for Charles Xavier. It looks like Charles Xavier's died, but no, it was a shapeshifter named Changeling.
Shapeshifter. Okay.
Well, we wrote it in as Changeling. And I think we even reported it once maybe as Changeling. And then we get a note from the attorneys saying, "We're sorry. DC has a character named Changeling." And we looked up and Marvel's was like 4 years older. It'd come first. It says it doesn't matter.
We don't want the lawsuit.
Wasn't worth the risk.
They won't have a leg to stand on, but since the names are the same, they could sue us over this.
We don't want the fight.
You can leave him looking like Changeling from the books. Can you just give him a new name? So I renamed him Morph. So I'll take credit.
I love it. It's a great name.
Yeah. So, but he pre-existed in the books as Changeling, and the artists used exactly the same. They used that as a model, and he ended up being again. We were looking for 8 or 9 different people in the X-Men that were as different from each other as possible. And none of the other X-Men were anything like Morph. So he fit in beautifully. Both when he was just happy-go-lucky, and later when he was damaged, he was a nice addition to the team.
I remember the dark eyes when he was damaged, to give him that look, of he's still struggling with being whole again,
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
That's
was heavy stuff for what I keep saying is a kid's Saturday morning show.
But for a lot of kids, it is heavy.
Yes. And I respect that. I respect kids. That was the beauty of this show from the top down, from the president of Fox Kids Studios, who said, we're making this show. A woman named Margaret Lesh was pushing for X-Men. And you don't write down, you write up. Treat this like an hour-long live-action drama. Half-hour animated for kids, but don't you dare write down to the kids. Write up.
I love that. And what I remember about reading, I think Miss Margaret, is that what you said?
Margaret Lesh,
Margaret Lesh, is that she understood there was so much value in the diversity in the X-Men, and that was going to create this resonating impact with all viewers from all places, right? And obviously it did. I mean, I have friends around the world who love X-Men.
Yeah. It's so gratifying to hear that.
It is really, when we meet people on podcasts or at Comic Cons especially, and then they say, "Oh, you don't understand. I grew up in Brazil, or I grew up in Ireland, or I grew up in
Malaysia,
or New Zealand,
Philippines." Yeah,
and that was my show every day. And somehow it was just at the right time, where wasn't the cable TV really hadn't taken off yet. There wasn't that much competition, and so if you got a success like this, and you had a good big company like Fox behind you, they showed it everywhere.
We didn't really realize that at the time.
And really, we go anywhere we go, they'll say, "Oh," if we're wearing some sort of X-Men shirt or whatever.
Previously on X-Men, that's my jacket right here.
People will stop us, at airports or whatever. So you just don't understand. And one place we had two channels. We had the English speaking channel and the Arabic channel. So I learned English by watching the X-Men show. Or whatever, or they say, I became.
So they say "Hey Bub" a lot.
Yeah, hey Bub, and whatever that translates into Arabic.
Right.
But it became this international thing, and you start adding up those people, because we get like half the audience here in the U.S. So there's about.
No, don't gloss over that. That's a huge thing.
Yeah. We got about half the TVs when you were watching on Saturday morning. All the U.S. and Canada.
Back on Saturday morning, when that was the kids' Saturday morning.
At least half the TVs that were on. We're watching X-Men,
which is
astonishing. The other half are watching whatever else was on
NBC,
television.
CBS,
and so that was maybe 20 million people watching every Saturday morning. Then it went into syndication and went all around the world. So it's ends up being hundreds of millions of people.
I mean,
and you don't think that it's our day job. It's just we're paying the rent with this, and we're trying to get trying to get the story out by the end of the week, and nobody's thinking that a tenth of the planet is watching this thing, and yet it turned out to be that. And the love we get at Comic-Con, it's amazing. We don't get snarky questions. We've had 30, 40 panels at the various cities, and we have not had one. You think you know how to do the X-Men. Well, it's just all thank you. The show is important to us.
Yes,
and then they proceed from there.
Well, what is amazing to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you came into X-Men the Animated Series with not a lot of background of X-Men history, right?
No.
If either of us can admit that now.
Yeah. As I say, we had all these people around us on the team, like the artists knew it by heart, the people at Marvel obviously knew it by heart, and three other writers that really understood them. But for me and my main writers, I've been 7 or 8 years in the business, and it's like any other thing. You get thrown in the deep end on this job and say, well, who do I depend on to make sure that it gets done right? I just picked the people who I thought were the best animation writers, and I didn't know if they knew them or not. Obviously, my Mark and Michael Edens had a hand in like half the episodes. Neither one of them had picked up an X-Men book in their life. So it's just, I knew these people knew how to write effective, dramatic, heroic stories. And then we had all the other people on the team, from the artists to the Marvel executives, who could just pour in all but this is from Wolverine's background, or this is, you understand, Cyclops was at an orphanage, and you could do that. And so we could use all that to build the strongest stories we could figure out. And it was a little bit of an advantage because we didn't go into it kind of with an agenda. There were a couple 3 writers that were such fans, they couldn't help themselves. They would want to put 11 stories worth of people and stuff and powers into one story, because this is also important to me. I got to see this on the screen. I got to see this on the screen. And we'd pick it up and we'd say, we can only use 10% of that. I know you're excited, but we have to tell a story here that makes sense to us. So there was this nice balance between people who absolutely loved it and grew up with the characters, and those of us that were just looking at it as a craft thing, as a how do we make the story more exciting, and how do we respect these characters? Because that was a nice thing out here in Hollywood. So often people just say, "Oh, I've got the rights to doing something. Let's do it some incredibly new way that it's just going to make all the fans hate us." That there's a certain arrogance to the fact that, well, if something is this, you think if they realize something is this popular,
right,
there's a reason for it, and you shouldn't go just casually changing it. But they don't think that way. They think, "Oh, I think it was
C.S. Lewis that said, tell the story, stick to the truth, no matter how many times it's been said, and in the end, you wind up being very different."
Yeah.
Well, and to the folks on the artist side, people like Larry Houston, they understood, they knew the X-Men chapter and verse, but they were also committed to telling the best stories and the best ways to tell those stories. So Larry, I think, wasn't he the one who, February 1992, who, no internet, no World Wide Web, photocopied, what was it, a Marvel game book or something?
Or the Marvel Universe book.
The Marvel black
I
and
couldn't
white.
I couldn't get my hands on one, so he Xeroxed one. His for me.
that was the Marvel was also in New York at the time.
So that was your source material at the time.
Yeah, and there was a big deal that they're 3,000 miles away, and the way we communicated was by fax or
landline,
or by snail mail. We'd say, okay, we're going to do a show with Mojo in it, and I can't find anything down at the comic book store. I've been told about him, but I understand you've got a couple old comics that you can make me copies of. Well, they're busy getting 17 comic book titles out, and sometimes it would take 8-10 days until I get on my desk. Oh, okay, this is Mojo. Now I've got 2 days left to do the story. It was a very primitive setup as far as the production, and we just had to trust ourselves. And part of the problem with animation is you write the story, you record it, and then it's 5-6 months before you've got it all together and you can see it and say, "Oh, this is working," versus in live action, you look at it that night.
Yeah.
So you don't have that.
Say, "Oh,
you can't reflect and react and respond and correct
what we thought, or that action. Nobody's caring about that villain. We got to change something right away." You just have to believe in what you've decided and hope against all hope when it comes back in the fall, it's going to look right and sound right and make sense. And that first season, there's a lot of little pushback or second guessing, or maybe we should have done this a different way from people, not from us internally.
No.
Right.
We just kind of we're holding on for dear life. We said, we know this is right, but please let us be right. And they came out okay, and the second guessing stopped. But for that first year, there was a great deal of just not knowing if this was going to go right, because it wasn't what people were used to. An advertiser in Baton Rouge on your local television station is not used to seeing adult shows at 9 a.m. to sell cereal with.
Right.
Are the kids just going to turn off from this?
We were used to what? Chip and Dale? Do I remember reading Julia? Chip and Dale?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see. Yep, Chip and Dale.
I love Chip and Dale. Rescue Rangers.
She wrote 14 of them, more than anybody else on the staff at Disney.
We met at Disney TV Animation. That's how we
isn't that cool?
Yeah, it was
that's like the dream right there.
It was for me coming out here. All I wanted to do was write somehow for Hollywood.
Yeah, it was like a big fraternity sorority house.
Yes.
There were about 100 artists and maybe 50 writers, and we were all at around 30. And,
it was magic.
And and after this, the rest of our careers, it's all just been project by project.
Right.
You get hired for something, or you don't get hired for something. That was like a 3-year contract.
It
and
was.
I was like, we got to write for Disney for 3 years and guaranteed income, and boom, that was great.
That is all. Well, that brings me to a question, because you guys started at Disney, but then X-Men went to Fox, and now you guys and Fox and Disney are all back together again.
Yeah. One day Disney will own everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's another conversation. But yeah, that's pretty exciting. All the magic is coming back together.
Yeah.
We were thrilled enough when Disney Plus began to run the X-Men animated series on the channel, because if you're a fan of the show, there were several years where it wasn't available. It just wasn't playing it wasn't available on Hulu. It played here for a little bit, then it was gone. I mean, it never got a full DVD box set Blu-ray release here in the United States.
So
not that I'm bitter,
yeah.
but it wasn't easy to find full episodes of X-Men for years.
And we were trying to talk to people about it, or go to people talk to people at cons with when we got the first book, and said, well, we hear maybe with Disney kids able to buy Fox, maybe they'll put the show on again, but it was.
So then when X-Men the animated series started airing on Disney Plus, that was a lot of fun for us, just finding out so many folks were excited about that. And somewhere I've got a screen grab from Disney Plus listing its own shows from that time period, and the number one show at that time on Disney Plus for that window of time by a lot was X-Men the animated series. We beat the Mandalorian.
Oh, that's big news right there.
I try to explain to other people in our business who don't know the animation side of things, because it's a less glamorous, less we're over here in the corner. That's fine. And I try to explain to my friend that works in reality TV. I said, Julie had this list, and Disney Plus, there is huge corporation. They're just getting their streamer together, and they ask all the fans that they can get in touch with on the web. Of the 200 things we have, of all the Star Wars stuff, of all the Pixar stuff, all the Disney movies, of all the Disney TV shows, of all the Marvel things, of all these huge properties, what is it that you're most anticipating, excited about seeing when Disney Plus actually comes on the air? And that's the thing the list she was talking about. I saw the list. It was like 150 things. And X-Men the animated series was at the very top.
It would have been in my top.
All that stuff. And that's just that people understand that. It's okay, Star Wars, okay, Pixar, okay, Disney. And yet they're more excited about your little cartoon than they are about.
Correct me if I'm wrong, in movie form. Well, I mean, there's been a few X-Men animated series. I guess I'm forgetting about some of the modern stuff, but this is still where I can see my classic X-Men, right? Yeah. And
it's like people that have a love and affection for the first Star Trek, the original series from the 60s.
Yeah. What is your intro to the whole universe of stuff? And for me and for you as fans, for me, Star Trek, the original series was my intro
when we were
to
little,
that universe.
I mean, it's our the geekness comes out. We talk about. I remember where I was and what I was wearing, who was in the room. The first when that first Star Trek episode aired in 1966. Oh my God, and that stays with you.
It does.
And some of the later shows had much bigger budgets, and the movies were huge
my gosh.
But my affection remains with the thing that I saw 55 years ago.
It marks you.
Yeah,
it does.
It does.
It does. And so I think for many folks, again, remembering that back in 1992, there was a huge comic book fan base for X-Men the animated series, but that was not big enough fan base.
That's a couple million people. It wasn't
within the comic book universe.
Yeah.
Not
Right. Those 8 million sales was a lot of people buying 10 copies of the book. Okay. Because that market was in place at that time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
talking about 8 million viewers of, you know, 8 million comic book fans at the time that were buying X-Men. That was not the case. When I think about Saturday morning cartoons and X-Men, the animated series, I'm like, this is the foundation that was laid that the MCU is now built on. You know what I mean?
I'm going to tap you on that and say
Mhm.
I agree, and
Mhm.
I will take it to my grave that you had X-Men, you had 30 years of X-Men, and now you've had 60 years of X-Men, and that exist.
Well, I
But
mean, look,
X-Men the animated series is the bridge from the X-Men stuff to what has become the MCU.
Yeah,
Because
well-
if you didn't have X-Men the animated, you wouldn't have the first X-Men movies. And without those movies,
right,
Wouldn't
Hugh
that Iron
Jackman.
Man and the rest.
Yeah, when Hugh Jackman says, "What do you want me to wear?" Yellow. He knows. He knows. I think it's Cyclops says, "What do you want to wear?" Yellow spandex. And
Yeah.
we're like, he's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
They're talking about us who watched the X-Men the animated series
Mhm.
and fell in love with those classic. We're calling it now classic outfits, right?
And then that group of fans grew up. And when the live action films came out, there was an audience who knew the characters from the animated series.
At a minimum, I think we really, if you ask Margaret, whose baby this is, who made this happen, gets all the credit for
Deserves all the credit.
hiring the entire creative staff herself.
Yeah.
And putting her job on the line.
Yeah. She had spent the previous 8 years trying to get any sort of X-Men property on the air or any Marvel property with no luck. Hollywood didn't get it. They didn't get that you could take these comic book characters who are all internally with internal dialogue thought bubbles and make it into something for television and movies. And we showed you could do that. And then the features came along and showed you could do that on an even bigger scale. But I think translating from the page to the screen was something that certainly the executives that Margaret was pitching to just didn't think was going to work. Just this is not possible. There's not a market for this. You're crazy. And so at a minimum, we opened the door for the folks. And she even after this became this huge hit for Fox. And just was, again, over 50% of the market they were getting. She went to everything's very kind of pigeonholed out here. And she went to the people above her in the Fox studios and said, let me talk to the feature people.
This could be a live action.
This could be a series of live action movies.
Listen to me.
And it was kind of, oh, well, you got the kids. You're making us money, Margaret. That's very nice. Pat her on the head and said, oh, maybe. And they looked into it and they said, well, maybe we'll take out an option. Maybe we'll try. And they kind of got around to it finally. And oh, boom, $7 billion movies later.
Right.
Thanks, Mark. No thanks.
Oh, no thanks to Margaret.
Yeah,
no one thanked Margaret.
No. But we thank Margaret.
Yeah.
All the fans thank Margaret for going through the trouble. But
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for someone like me, I was reading about Margaret in your book, which I want to talk about here in just a minute. The way she went to battle to make sure this happened, and obviously picking the right people, that's, the key to put it together. But when I think about the MCU, the Avengers, because they were kind of, Iron Man, they were on the big screen first, not counting Spider-Man, but we're talking about the MCU. I don't think people will realize how much further ahead in popularity X-Men and Spider-Man were in comparison to the Avengers.
Oh.
Yeah. No, go ahead, speak to it.
No, if you'd stopped people on the street back in 92 to 97 and said, can you name me 5 superheroes? You'd probably get Batman, Superman, maybe Spider-Man, maybe Wonder Woman.
Before 92.
Before 92, I'm sorry, before X-Men. You probably would, someone could say, yeah, I've heard of the X-Men, but maybe not, and then after, so Iron Man, Thor, the other Marvel characters, yeah, I might have heard of them, but after X-Men came out and kind of opened that door for people, then it's hard to realize what a huge risk it was for them to make the movie Iron Man, because they were gambling, on a.
But
they'd had a success with X-Men.
There've been 3 good X-Men movies.
Right,
already,
exactly.
So, but
if there hadn't been, I doubt they would have let.
Well, that's kind for y'all to say good X-Men movies, and they were good, but for someone for me, who watched X-Men,
successful X-Men movies.
Successful. Okay. Yes. Okay. Success is hard to define, but for me, it wasn't my X-Men. I'll just be frank. Okay.
Yeah.
And the prospect, well, with X-Men 97, I mean, from what glimpse I've seen, like I'm getting my X-Men back.
You really are, and they want to do that. However, I mean,
if we're speaking about X-Men 97,
correct.
Let's just to clarify here. Back in November, Disney Plus released their sort of what we're going to be doing over the next couple of years sort of schedule, and they announced X-Men 97. And I loved how they did it on Twitter with the sad Wolverine meme with him looking at the photo and it being X-Men 97.
Yeah.
And they have been gracious and reached out to you and to me and to Larry Houston to come on as consulting producers because they want this show to pick up where the original X-Men series wrapped.
They want it to be an extension. And just as you said about the C.S. Lewis quote, whoever it is doing this new show is going to make it their own.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just given that, and that's going to, no matter who's involved in it, there was great love and affection and respect from the entire group of people that are doing this show.
That we've had
starting
the
at the top
to meet,
with Bo DeMaio, who's the showrunner on the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they have this challenge. I believe they're looking at 10 episodes for the first season that's going to come out mid next year, and they're starting it soon after ours ended. There'll be references. Fans will be able to sit down and say, "Oh, I'm thinking about stuff that happened previously on X-Men."
Yeah.
And it's going to lead into
like, where's Professor X?
Inform that, where is he, and what are we going to do with him? He's out in wherever. So they're starting at that starting point, and then building the show, building the stories with that they like to build off of that. They could have just said, no, we're just going to do a new show.
Sure, which is what they do here in Hollywood.
9 out of 10 times, we have friends that were part of other very successful shows, and when they get rebooted, not a phone call, not a card, not a bit of recognition, just we're going to do the new whatever, Animaniacs or whatever. In this case, they were all nice and respectful enough, and we said, it's your show. We're here, and we're here to. If there's a red flag, we'll say, I don't know if that looks like
how that would be.
Yeah. So we're on for that, or for maybe some ideas to the things we'd like to see. But really, it's their show. But it is absolutely, you can tell by the design. You can. It's the same design, but slightly modernized, slightly more beautiful. 5 times the money spent on it.
Yeah.
Not that we're better.
Right.
But with this wonderful, huge budgets and with a lot of thought and a lot going into it, these are real super fans, really respectful super fans of the show, extending the show into new places. So we couldn't have asked for a better setup than that.
Well, I will tell you, as soon as that's released, to your point, the meme, and it's like, oh, this is really happening. They're going to pick up in 97. But then to hear that you guys are still attached to it in whatever way that is, that gave me this okay, they get it. Disney gets it. And what I've been noticing with, the new shows that are being developed is they realize we don't actually have to do something totally different. We can honor the nostalgia that's built into the original fan base, and the new fan base just flows right in, and you don't ostracize one side or the other. Yeah. And so I think that, that's my hope for X-Men 97 is everybody gets honored. We get the nostalgia and we get all the new fans, and they build, another layer of that foundation for whenever, the X-Men get introduced into the MCU.
Right. Yeah. And I do not envy those people, that are trying to juggle all those 8,000 characters and get it. Oh, people ask us, well, what do you think about the X-Men getting and the Avengers? And I said, I can't keep track of who's in the MCU as it is and who's doing what to whom. And then adding in the entire X-Men universe, someone's going to do it. They love these kind of challenges. The new Marvel people do, and they're amazing at them.
They're
it makes
I
my
mean, they
head.
just merged. Yeah, you're about to go to Spider-Man, aren't you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We just went
We
and saw the
Spider-Man No
movie
Way Home.
finally and
Okay,
enjoyed it.
so because you're actual writers, you do this for a living. As a viewer sitting there, I was just amazed at how, how it flowed. From a scripting standpoint, even though they were really forcing these issues, right? They were forcing these characters into one storyline.
Right.
And my thought process was, what a clever way for Fox to raise the value of their properties by bringing these Spider-Man all into one universe for a moment. But how did they do that from a writing standpoint and a scripting standpoint? I don't know.
It's I think the magic sauce that I figured out was this parallel universe business.
Oh
Mhm.
man,
Where
yeah,
if you
the
bought
multiverse.
if you bought Doctor Strange's ability to let you into these 3 or 4 different timelines, because that's a real struggle with a lot of comic book
Yeah.
franchises that go on long enough. You'll have different writers doing different things with the characters, and you have to, or it's like with soap operas, try to explain, oh, this is this person coming back, and they were here 20 years ago, but now they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And making all sense of that, if you've got this they were smart. They put a magician in the middle of it
Mm-hmm.
that can show you these different things. And then when they were really careful and clever when they melded them together,
Mm-hmm.
and we all bought it. It was I wasn't quite sure it was going to work before we went to saw the movie, but you're right. They made us believe it, and it just there's a lot of built-in emotion when you see a character that's been through,
Yeah.
the 10th movie. It's like we talk to people about writing for TV shows. It can be really satisfying because you write 50, 60, 70 episodes. By episode 55, you've lived a lot of stuff with these characters. And when you give them a dramatic moment, it's not just that one story. It's you've lived through all the things up to that moment, and your heart bleeds twice, 10 times as hard, because you know what this character's been through to get there. Whereas if you're just writing a movie, you just got that one shot. Not that I love writing movies, but there's a great satisfaction on the writing part where you get to add depth and depth and depth and depth as you get further along into a series.
The fact that Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas happened in the 3rd season of X-Men, the animated series, so many folks reference that. And I believe it's because there were 2 years spent introducing these characters, inviting them into your home every week, getting to know them, learning their universe. So when you tell the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix sagas,
you're invested in Jean and Scott.
Yeah, when Scott goes, Jean, you feel it, right?
Yeah, and when she sacrifices,
you
feel it. It's oh my God.
I mean, y'all took what Chris Claremont did in the comic books with Jean and put it on the screen in such a I mean impactful way for me. To this day, I have a full Dark Phoenix card collection that's on display in my other room because she's her as a character and as a villain. The complexity with that of and I just think about this entity, right, that wanted to feel all the emotions and feelings, and Jean gave her the biggest. I'm using her as the Phoenix. She could feel it the most through her because of her power set. And this meek. I mean, maybe that's not the right word, but kind of soft character now is this villain who can fly into the sun. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So when it comes to villains, I've got Magneto here. So your heroes are really only as good as your villains, right?
Always.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
So of the villains in X-Men the animated series, which one was your favorite to dive into their thought process and then put them up on the screen?
I want to give you and Mark Edens serious credit here because it's easy to forget, but the first 2 episodes of X-Men, Night of the Sentinels parts 1 and 2, the big bad guys that were introduced, it wasn't Magneto, it wasn't Apocalypse, it wasn't a
bad villain. It wasn't a bad mutant. It was something that it was humanity's scared reaction to the emergence of mutants as embodied in those big robots. And so obviously they didn't have thought processes, but
Right.
the human villains behind them did. Those were some of our more simple villains, or the humans that were scared or angry or not wanting to give up over the planet to these new upstart mutants.
But that then set the stage for what became X-Men the series.
Yeah, because then you meet Magneto, and now what Magneto's going on about, you understand. You just see 2 episodes of humanity trying to try to bring a Holocaust in effect on these mutants. And when Magneto says, no, they'll never listen to us, come, be with me and we'll be separatists, and have this completely anti-X-Men theory, philosophy behind him, you sympathize with him because you've seen 2 episodes of these massive robots trying to hurt your stars. So it was very, there was some struggle early on with, there was somebody at Marvel that really loved Magneto somehow desperately, or thought that he was the end all and be all of X-Men villains. And we got a long memo saying, you guys made a really screwed the pooch here and did a terrible job with the opening few stories, because you started with the Sentinels, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, that was
and
scary.
We had to gently tell him to, look, how nice for your contribution, but you just don't understand. We need it for these dramatic reasons,
right?
And there's just an animation reason. In comic books at the time, these people were ripping the heck out of each other. Couldn't do that on kids' TV. Wolverine could slash a robot, but he couldn't slash a person.
Right.
Even if it was a supervillain, even if it was Apocalypse, even no matter what, we can't see him. So you can't have Wolverine and his claws and have kids fall in love with him if he can't do what he's supposed to do. So besides
and be the best at what he does.
Right.
And what he does isn't very nice.
Yeah. And what he does is not very nice.
So starting with the Sentinels was absolutely essential for us. But as far as the depth of the villains, obviously Magneto there's just such a 3-dimensional relationship between him and Xavier.
Yes.
This absolute love and respect between 2 people that can't help but be adversaries. Yeah. And that we love that, setting that up. That's just,
they, in a sense, they want the same thing. They just have a different view of how to get there. And depending on how you value things, that determines whether you're the good guy or the bad guy.
Yeah, that was I think the deepest level we went on villains. Apocalypse was probably the most fun to write. A lot of our writers, let me have him get big and pontificate about the future of existence. Please let me, because he was just great fun. But Magneto was the deep one.
And we had our fun. We didn't find out until too late, which still hurts my heart. But when you began doing research for the book previously on X-Men, we discovered that the first voice for Apocalypse, John Colicos, I could be pronouncing it wrong, but after, and that great voice, we can still quote, "I am the rocks of the eternal shore, crash upon me and be broken." We learned that he was in the original Star Trek, and in the original Star Trek series, he played the very first Klingon in the show. He was Kor.
That same Canadian actor that was Klingon #1 was our Apocalypse.
So that was special for you guys, wasn't it?
We didn't know until
after he passed.
Oh my God!
So we didn't know to ask. We didn't know we didn't get to go geek out and fanboy girl on this guy and say, "Oh, you don't understand," and we won't, but we heard stories. We heard stories from the other actors about what a great guy he was.
Yeah.
Right. So who was your favorite animated character on X-Men, villain or hero?
Ooh, animated character.
Yeah.
Well, in her, just because she got to do what she did, Storm. It was interesting. I just learned last time we were with Larry Houston. There you go. He explained, because it never occurred to me to ask why, but in the show with her white uniform. He was just saying, drawing her, and then with all the stuff the weather that she'd be controlling in her original black outfit, she she got lost, you know, in the,
She
in
got
the
lost in the weather.
so
Yeah.
I changed it to the white outfit so you could see her, and
It's perfect.
never knew that was the reason, but it makes so much sense.
That is awesome. I did not know that. I love that.
I just found out this, you know, last time I
Yeah.
saw Larry. So
yeah.
Storm was Beast was the most fun to write for as a writer on the show.
Okay, I've got to ask, who was the intellect in the room that was looking up or knowing all of these Shakespearean quotes?
We
You have
it
the
was,
book over there?
it was I could run go get the Roget's. I had a couple old from college. I had a couple old dusty quote books like Roget's Thesaurus or some of the famous quotations.
Quotes. Literally, there was no internet. You had to look this stuff up.
This was just
on books.
This just happened. You know, we just had in the first story, and it's just a random thing that we just threw in for fun. They're about to burst into that place where they're not supposed to be, that lab where they're not supposed to be. And I'm thinking, you know, in other shows, we have been encouraged, like to say, if we're writing for Ninja Turtles, Cowabunga, you know, calls to action.
What's the call to action?
Yeah, what's call to action? And sometimes, you know, you help the people that are doing the merchandise come up with a cool new one, or you just make sure to repeat the one. You know, you can't do Ninja Turtles without saying Cowabunga. So I'm just thinking, okay, well, Beast seems like the Shakespearean scholar. He's not going to say something like "Let's go, Joe," you know, or
right. He wouldn't say that.
So instead of that, why don't we just have him quote some really obscure poem? So I just looked under. I think I looked under feet.
Right.
Because their feet would come up over these sensors. He was trying to avoid them, and found this obscure poet from like the 1790s in England,
John Wesley,
who was that's
not him.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
much more obscure.
Yeah.
And if you look in Wikipedia under that poet's name, that's the only quote in any movie or any TV show ever made of his work. And he just said, a minor poet for a minor obstacle. And I wrote that at first. I just like once more into the breach, or something like that. Some real generic. And then just that night, just said, why don't we have a little fun with this and see if anybody minds? And everybody thought, oh, this is cool. And the other writers wanted to outdo it after that.
Oh,
okay. More clever.
Now let's see if I can come up with a Beast quote that's more obscure than what Eric came up with. And so it became kind of a thing, among us.
Coventry Patmore, the first guy.
Coventry Patmore was the name of that first poet.
Faint heart and averted feet, and many a tear in our opposed paths to persevere.
Opposed path. It was an opposed path.
Right.
It was connected in like three ways.
Yeah.
And see that the nice thing about working for Fox is that they kept on pushing us to do personal things like that.
Yeah.
To try different things with the characters. A lot of times, other shows we worked at is you get these notes. I'll take that stuff out. Kids will never get it.
Oh, but
it was wonderful.
Quote.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always in haste. Never in haste. I'm often in a hurry.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So it's just the support we knew, at the 11th hour, just before we were going to hand the script in, we knew we could do something weird and just unsupportable like that, and we'd get support from our.
So, Julia, you like Storm and Beast, Eric?
Of all things, I found myself empathizing most with and focusing on writing most of all people, because he's never on the list for the fans out there, for Professor X, because I had 20 different people writing for me over the 5 years, and very, very different people. And we all were trying to keep this world both familiar and consistent, yet fresh and new and not repeating ourselves. Didn't always succeed, but we had, it's one of the biggest challenges about a show going on. Okay, well, what do you do for episode 10 or episode 100 that you haven't already done 3 times? And so in dealing with all these different writers with all different backgrounds coming to me and trying to make these stories work, I felt a little like Xavier, like the father figure, Xavier, trying to keep all these
They had all their different powers and abilities, and you were trying to put them all together as one team and get them to work.
Decide who to assign to what and when to pull them back, or when to be angry with them because they're 3 days late and the artists are going to shoot me because
Right.
the script isn't done yet.
Mhm.
Dealing with them, I felt very Professor X-ish, and so I found myself drifting in. And also, he got to articulate everything that everybody was thinking underneath without it seeming too pedantic. You know, if we worked at it, his philosophy came out naturally, not like a teacher or something.
So your name is Eric, but you like Professor Charles Xavier the most.
Exactly.
Not Eric Magnus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eric
Could have been Magneto.
Yeah, but yeah, Xavier I was close to.
But that is absolutely awesome. Well, look, guys, I don't know about you, but I have had the most absolute fun today, being able to interview you and ask these questions and not only get to know you, but learn more about the history of X-Men the animated series. And I've already been doing that through this book right here. I found this at Books A Million, but I believe you can also find it on Amazon.
Oh yeah.
We would, if I can jump in here,
Yeah.
we are at Xmen TAS, either .com online or on Twitter or on Facebook. If you find us on Twitter, we have links to Amazon there. If you go through there, then we might get a penny, maybe, I don't know. But so on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, yeah, please. I'm on there way too much, and we're just carrying the torch for good old X-Men the animated series.
Well, what I love about this book is you get the art. You know.
Yes, that was us climbing through some dusty
storage
units.
bins. A lot of basements and an artist's old beat up boxes full of stuff.
And that art there.
There's our villains.
Larry Houston and Rick Hoberg, who are the guys who did the show.
2 of the 4 people basically in charge of designing and drawing the show, original show,
did this
came back and did the cover, both
front and the back.
Front and the back.
Oh, wow. That was an honor for them to do that.
Yes. We were very excited about that. Very excited.
Well, I have a lot more questions, but I do not want to keep you all day.
Okay.
This has
Thank you so much, Justin. This was just a real treat.
Yeah.
Well, now do you have any idea now the impact that you guys and X-Men
it's starting to sink in. Our kids used to tell us. They used to grab us and yank us over and say, "Mom, Dad, you understand? All my friends are watching your show."
Yeah.
Well, we're good. Good.
Okay,
That's
we're
nice.
good. You know.
But we would watch this show and then we would go buy these trading cards because it wasn't always comic books. It was comic books, but the cards were just easier to digest in some ways, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you may or may not be aware now, but so in 96, Marvel kind of has its downfall, so to speak, right? And Marvel cards didn't disappear, but it shrunk. And the local comic book stores, they went away, throughout most of the country. Some survived, but most didn't. And then all of a sudden, right here in 2020, 2021, 2022, Marvel cards is seeing this really a resurrection and coming back. And most of the people that I'm talking to, we somehow end up back at this conversation about X-Men, the animated series, being connected to our fandom of collecting X-Men and even Spider-Man. It had an animated series as well, and so forth. And so that was the genesis for many of us to collect Marvel cards. And some of the cards are selling for a lot of money. There's been record sales of like $130,000+ for one card. So
could you tell us which one that was?
I could. They're hard to find, so it's a chance that you don't have it. I actually have. I'll show you real quick because I wish I had it with me. But so this card right here, which is the Wolverine card from Jim Lee.
Yeah, I recognize that one. Sure.
Okay. In that box that you have, Jim Lee had signed them. Not all of them, obviously, but you could get it as an insert, as a chase card.
Oh, it's okay.
I have one of those being graded right now. That's why I don't have it with me. But
nice.
Marvel cards is just it's exploding right now. It's a lot of fun. And I knew that people who follow Marvel cards would love to hear from you guys because you're such a huge impact on why we're fans of Marvel cards.
Okay.
That's very flattering. And thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Hey, everybody. I really appreciate you watching. And this has been a lot of fun. If you could remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I hope you have a marvelous day.